Welcome everyone to December 31st, our completion and our celebration ceremony. So we get together, those of us inside of the Evolving Sisters Network membership, every Sunday, and we experience a transmission of the gene keys through me. And then we get together in what we call the sisterhood activation. And that's where we process it and we share. And we really have become such a tight community and a group of light workers who on a regular basis are nourishing each other and themselves. And so for those of you who are new, you're always welcome to join us. And I'm so excited to open it today to our entire community. I did this a couple years ago and I had a blast just using this day on this made up day in the Gregorian calendar, this so-called ending, to memorialize it in a powerful way, because we are cyclical people. We like to complete and we like to begin again. And if you have downloaded The Moon in You, I have the 2024 version ready. So we have that opportunity of completion and seed planting every month. So I've been really interested in following the cycles of the moon as a way of constantly letting go and constantly really checking in with myself. What's true? What's alive? We give meaning to the things we put our attention on. Thank you, Karen. You have teed us off for our transmission today. We work in tandem here. This is a network. It's a collaboration. And what I love is that you all have the keys. We all have threads and we weave them together. So just drop in so we can get to know you right now. Drop into the chat where you are Zooming from. And I know some of you are off camera. That's okay. If you can be on camera, be on camera. If you need to be off because there's things going on, that's great. We have California, we have Colorado, we have Encinitas, Solana Beach, Houston, LA, Pleasanton, Portland, Cambridge, the UK, Denmark, Florida, Denver. I love it. Northern New Mexico, Las Vegas, Canterbury, England. Beautiful. And I know we have Macedonia. Tanya, she's one of our members. Washington, Wild Walker Valley. Okay, great. So let's create a light grid around the globe, wherever you are in this moment. Just breathe in and expand the light within you. And then exhale out and expand the light outside of you. Maud's from France. Tracy is a Capricorn sun and a Virgo moon. Thank you for anchoring your uniqueness here. All right, sisters. So what we're going to do today is a little unique. We have an architecture to these Sundays, and we're going to add in a little bit more for our completion. This should go about 90 minutes. And I'm going to do a gene key activation where the sun is. So for some of you know this esoteric teaching called the gene keys. And it's a lot like the Enneagram or astrology. It's just a way to see things. And Richard Rudd developed the gene keys through his work with Ra in human design. So the gene keys comes out of human design. It's based on the I Ching and the astrological placement. So what's important inside of our community is knowing what your life work is. That represents 70 to 80% of your world. And your life work is initiated on your birthday. So that is where the sun is shining. And today, the sun is shining in Gene Key 38. So around these 5-6 days, if you have a birthday, then you might have your life work as Gene Key 38. And so the sun is always shining and it goes around this mandala on a particular gene key. And so I give the transmission because the energy is hitting here and it tends to hit the themes that you are present to in your own life. And we also talk about 3 layers of that theme: the shadow theme, the gift theme, and the highest divine expression of that theme. Now, I use Richard Rudd's work as a springboard. I jump off from here and I weave through my own tales. And then we use this as the focal point of our sisterhood activation. So today, after the Gene Key activation, we're going to go into our sisterhood activation. And this will begin our ritual. We'll start with a meditation to really survey 2023 so that we can powerfully complete 2023. I love powerful completions because they set you up for the new. Oftentimes we want to blow by things because either they were painful, we're so glad they're over, or if you're like me, I don't really like to think about the past. I'm always thinking about the future, but we miss very deep lessons if we don't mine the wisdom and we don't celebrate how far we've come. So we're going to do some of that. And we're going to have breakout sessions. We've got a good group, and it's nice to be able to articulate. Not everyone gets to articulate inside of a big group and share. So we'll get to do that together. So even if you're off camera, just make sure you can be on audio with the people that you are sharing with in the breakout session. And we'll do groups of 3 so that if someone can't, you can listen in, but you can participate as you can. And then we're going to come back, do some shares to anchor in what we've learned and experienced, and then have an embodiment, just a quick embodiment movement to complete the past. And then we are going to end with a blessing. Now, we're not going to plant seeds. That is for another day. If you follow the moon cycles, the seed planting time is January 11th. That is the new moon. Let me just make sure I just made a little shift on my audio. So the new moon is January 11th this year, and it's in Capricorn, and that will be the time to seed new seeds for the future. And that's great because you have a contemplation period. We really don't want to think so much about 2024 until we have consciously wrapped up and mined the gifts of 2023. All right, so shall we start? I'm going to welcome a couple more people in. Yeah, great, thank you. All right, so let's begin our transmission of where the sun is hitting in Gene Key 38. Now, I love Gene Key 38 because it is kind of an ass kicker. And so sometimes people in human design like to laugh that the Gregorian calendar starts the new year in an ass-kicking Gene Key, because the calendar in the rave calendar in the mandala begins on January 22nd. So it's a different Gene Key that we initiate ourselves with. But in this way, we are beginning with Gene Key 38. And guess what? The shadow is struggle. The gift is perseverance, and the city is honor. And I'm honored to begin here because I'm in my 2nd Saturn return. And so I have been embracing the ass-kicking parts of life. If you remember back to your Saturn return when you were 27, 28, 29, and you entered that period, chances are your life changed dramatically. I know mine did. I got a divorce at that time and I was in law school. And I have been no stranger to Saturn in my chart. Saturn is known as the Lord of Karma, the great teacher. And what we say about Saturn is that Saturn always delivers. So if you have this Gene Key, congratulations. I see Katya does. And this Gene Key is the warrior Gene Key. It's the warrior of light. I'm going to call it the warrior of honor, the warrior of purpose, the warrior of love. Yeah, Carolina says, I got married and my whole life changed. Yeah, it's really a change. It doesn't have to be negative, but it's a change. I was with my cousin who is probably entering his Saturn return. And I was with him at the funeral of his mother. So, of course, that kind of thing is going to forever change his life. So what we begin when we begin with Gene Key 38, we begin with the notion that life is hard. It is struggling. It is suffering. That's what the Buddha said. The Buddha's big revelation is that life is impermanent and life is suffering. And so I know that inside of the love and light spiritual communities, we don't like to say that. But as my second Saturn return, I'm just going to own it. I'm going to really own the struggle because there's some total gift in it. Just like every shadow, there's the gift in it. And we can't bypass it. Well, we can try, but we're going to miss out on the gifts. The I Ching, in the I Ching, this is fire over the lake. It's aggressive energy. And it also contains within it the victim energy of struggle. So victim energy is part of all the shadows. And struggle can either take you down a path of victimization or it can take you into honor. So let's position ourselves to discover what it would take to move into honor. So everyone and everything struggles. Did you notice that? Have you ever witnessed a baby being born? Oh my goddess. It's intense. It's messy. It's a struggle. You got to fight for your breath. You got to fight for your life. Do you really want to be here? What about a little chicken that's got to crack itself out of that egg? Like, that's work. It takes something to be here. But struggle is not the problem. Struggle is not the problem. Struggle actually makes life worth living. If you don't believe me, there's a book called Stumbling Onto Happiness that was written by a positive psychologist who really investigated happiness from a scholarly point of view, not from an agenda. And he found out that the people who had the most struggle actually were the happiest, because struggle has a way of reordering your priorities. You know what I mean? Without that, we're kind of like that kid in Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory who got everything. And they become, when you get everything and there's no struggle, you become like fat, obese, lethargic. You become entitled. And that's really the shadow that this Gene Key points to, is our entitlement. So we're going to liberate ourselves from our entitlement. I notice that when I'm driving the car, sometimes I'm getting really irritated at someone who is in front of me, not driving. It happened the other day. This guy was like driving super slow and I was like totally irritated. And then I was realizing I'm entitled. I feel entitled to go a certain speed. Like, you owe it to me to go this speed. So when we discover our entitlements, we can laugh at them. And that makes the way to transcend them. So when struggle traps you, it's because it's a habit. Now, if I continually feed that habit of complaining while I'm driving, it becomes a part of my identity. And that part of my identity hijacks the real gold that life has to show me. And guess what? Do you think I become a happy person? No, I'm actually a really unhappy person because it focuses my attention, just as Karen pointed out at the beginning, it focuses my attention on stuff I don't like. And then the world becomes a struggle because of all the stuff I don't like. So I love when I prepare for these Gene Keys, it's like magic happens. And so I'm going on this trip and I got an hour and a half in the car and I think I need a new Audible. So what Audible do I pick? Randomly, wasn't even on my wish list, I picked The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. How many have read that book? If you haven't, I totally recommend it. And if you have someone in your life who is in their Saturn return, maybe their first Saturn return, it's an excellent book for them. It's just written in colloquial fuckisms and yet has very deep spiritual truths inside of it. So I love that book because really what he's saying is, what are you giving a fuck about? And that's what the question is we're going to examine today. We're going to examine inside of our sisterhood activation. So one of the main themes inside of spiritual teaching, and that Mark Manson brought through in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, is something that I heard once in my leadership training. And it wasn't shocking to me because I had studied non-duality in Buddhism, but it was shocking to a lot of people inside my class. And it goes like this: life is empty and meaningless, but it's empty and meaningless that it's empty and meaningless. I felt like I went to bed last night and I'm like, oh my God, that's a koan. It's a koan. It's an unsolvable truth. It's a truth that you have to know inside your bones. And so the truth is that life is empty and meaningless isn't a vote to nihilism, because that's actually putting meaning into life. But it means that life just is. Life just is. And we're the ones who add the meaning. So if we take on that distinction in terms of struggle, then we get to ask ourselves, what has so much meaning that I am willing to struggle? What would I die for? And really then, what would I live for? This last couple of weeks, I have been in contact with a couple of my friends, and two of them happen to be Indians and from India, and their parents are both the same. And that is that their parents struggled when they came to this country to build wealth. And why did they do it? Because did they want a bunch of stuff? Did they go like, oh, I watched American TV and oh my God, they actually have the coolest cars and the nicest bling? No, they did not say that. They struggled to build wealth and they sacrificed because of their children. They wanted their children to have support, a life. So for them, they were willing to struggle and put up with less than for themselves for the benefit of their children. Now that can sometimes get really tricky because now I think I own you and I get to, I get to have lots of opinions about your life, but that's for you to decide. What's important enough? When we put our attention on achieving something like owning a house or putting our kids through college, all of those can be worthy goals. But if that's what gives us meaning in life, then what happens is the meaning is over as soon as those are achieved. So we get to put our third eye gaze, our drishti, on something that is worth a legacy. So what is more important than the obtaining of things, which we will do in the course of a lifetime? But it comes down to a leadership distinction of who are we wanting to be instead of what we want to have. I was thinking today about there are people whose it's worth it to them, whose meaning in life is to look good, to look beautiful. Well, what if we shifted that and said, what if it's to be beautiful? What would that do? So then I would have to go on an inquiry of what does it mean to me to be beautiful? How would I show up every day? So really, you're the one who decides what you're going to struggle with. You will struggle, and that's what will give life your meaning. But what do you choose? I contend that we should do something that is greater than ourselves, that gives us some kind of meaning beyond our temporal existence here. And this is why I'm pretty much obsessed with the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So I want to honor, and we're going to do this inside of the Sisterhood Activation, those who have come before us or after us and passed from this earthly body during the last year. Because death reminds us of something. And Mark Manson said it this way, and I have to read his quote, a couple quotes on death. You are going to die, but that's because you are fortunate enough to live. It's kind of like paying taxes. If you're paying taxes, you are fortunate enough to make money. And Mark Manson also said in this, in his book, death is the only thing we can know with certainty. And as such, it must become our compass by which we orient all other values and decisions. Everything else we think is certain is made up for our ego to not feel the terrifying nature of uncertainty. But death is certain. And so what would it be like if we lived like the samurai? And this is where the city of honor comes in. The samurai, have you ever heard about the samurai? Before they go into battle, they actually complete. They say all their goodbyes. It's a distinction called completion. It doesn't mean that they expect to not come home. It means that they clean it up. They're complete. Everything is clean. They've told the people they love that they love them. Their affairs are wrapped up in order, so no one has to deal with their chaos when they're dead. And then they can go to battle and play full out. And if they die with honor. And so I remember my Kundalini teacher, Jai Dev, said once, the samurai keep death as their counsel. And so you would be well advised to keep death as your counsel. So maybe the question would be, if I were dying, would I give a fuck about this? And that could reorient what you're willing to let go of and what you're willing to fight for. Death has a way of doing that, and being in the presence of death has a way of waking you up. So things like creativity, self-actualization, health. One of the things I think of is being a clearing for others. So part of what's meaningful for me is when I do the work that I become more and more empty so that I'm a clearing for others. That has meaning for me. And so when we go into our sisterhood activation, you'll be able to feel into what has meaning for you. The Dalai Lama is reported to have said, when he was asked the question, are you going to reincarnate and come back? He's like, I don't know, but if I do, I hope I have a lot of obstacles. That is honor. That is badassery. That is warriorship. That is a person who sees through that the outer has no bearing on me. It's all an inner game. And the outer is going to sharpen like iron sharpens iron. It's going to sharpen me to what has meaning. I'm going to end with this story because this is how I got onto the book, the subtle art of not giving a fuck. I listened to the excerpt, and the excerpt was about William James. And I had known who William James was because I did take psychology classes in college. So I knew of that person, but I had no idea of his story. And reading biographies are so instructive. They help us understand the backstory, because oftentimes we only see the successes of people, and then we compare ourselves to those successes and think that our struggle is wrong. But when we read the backstory, we realize that it was that person's greatness was overcoming struggle. So William James, and I'm just going to give the short version. You can Google it or read more about it later, but he talked about this story of William James. He's the father of psychology. He's super famous. His work is translated into many languages. He's well respected as a leader in psychology, and many beliefs that we have come from his body of work. However, I did not know that for the first few decades of his life, he was what his parents called him, a loser. He was completely sick in many different ways. He was living among successful family members, and so he constantly felt less than. His dad bought his way into Harvard Psychiatry School, and he said he had more in common with the patients than he did with the doctors. And so he dropped out of everything. He was in pain. He painted, but nobody liked the artwork that he did. One thing I learned is that he went on an expedition during a time, the turn of the century, where it was super dangerous to go to South America, and he got smallpox there and had to figure out his way to come home. So it's like, it was totally Saturnian. And so he was on the brink of just thinking, I'm just going to kill myself. Like, I just got to hit the reset button on this thing. But then he had heard someone speak, and he got this idea. And this idea was, what if I lived for 1 year believing that I'm responsible for everything that happens in my life? And that if shit just keeps happening to me and nothing transforms, then I'll know that that wasn't true, and I'll be pretty okay to kill myself. So he went on that adventure. And he says that moment when he made that choice and put himself in the position of driver, not as it's true or not true, but as a context of, I'm going to live like it's true. I don't really care if it's true or not true. I'm going to live like this. He actually went on to write many books. He got married. He had 5 kids. And he became well known as the father of psychology. And I love that story because it really shows us that here on Earth School, it's a Saturnian experience. And the thing that we have control over is how we are going to make meaning out of this Saturnian experience. Just to circle back to death, some of you know that a few weeks ago, my aunt died, and her kids are 22 and 27. And I was standing with the 27-year-old after we had gone and looked at her body before they closed the casket. And he's not a guy who's really emotionally processed yet. And yet, sometimes wisdom comes out of people in these moments. And he said to me, wow, life is really hard. And I said, yeah, Earth school is ruled by Saturn. He's like, who's that? I'm like, the ass kicker. And it's up to you to choose. And it's up to you to live in your heart and choose love. And let that be your guide. Because in this moment, you have two choices. This event can take you down and spiral you down, or this event can infuse your life with meaning. And really, even if he chose to go down, at some point, he would have that opportunity again. Because life is honorable. It gives us choices over and over and over. We are not doomed. We are not screwed. We are so loved. And we are given choice. And when we fuck up, we're given a new choice. How about now? What would it be like if you chose today that 2024 would be the year that you would claim your responsibility for everything that occurred in your life? Not the circumstances, we cannot control them, but how you made meaning. And so let us rub our hands together. We like to do this after our Gene Key transmission because we've just generated so much Shakti. And so let's gather it in our palms and let's beam it out. Just like our inner samurai, our inner warrior, we're taking these teachings for others. And as we beam it out, let's imagine that light grid that each one of us is representing where we are. And let's bathe this planet in light. And for the benefit of all beings, let's bow and dedicate our learnings, our teachings, our lives to the merits. May all beings benefit from the merits of our efforts. Namaste.